Hi guys, welcome to a mini lecture on Chapter 6. Let's get started. Okay, let's look at some basic terms. Demography is the science of population changes, so there's a lot of people out there that are very interested in population changes. This is important because, as we will see in class, political scientists can predict how different population groups will vote or how they will feel about certain things. And so it's important for political parties to understand population changes. It's important for candidates to understand population changes so that they can speak to the needs of the people that are hopefully going to be electing them into office. One of the tools that's available in looking at population changes is the census. And so the census is a very detailed account. There are government workers, there are lots of people that are hired by the government, and they go out all throughout the country and they literally have a census given to ideally every single U.S. citizen, and even those that are not U.S. citizens, to gather information to find out who lives where. So even those people that aren't U.S. citizens, if they're here legally, the government still wants to know about their demographics. They want to know who they are, what age they are, what race they are, and that sort of thing too. So this census is a really valuable tool for understanding those population changes. It happens every 10 years. So the last census took place in 2010. So the next one is coming up. So we should be hearing about it more and more in the news because it's actually a very, very political thing. You may think, well, these government people just wander around and ask you your age, your gender, your race, your income level, your education level. They notice how many people are moving into an area, et cetera, et cetera. But it's very politically charged because it's the census that determines the House of Representatives. So if you remember, the House of Representatives is based on population. And so if, let's say, Idaho gets all of a sudden 1 million more residents in the state between 2010 and 2020, odds are we would gain a representative. And another state would have to lose a representative. So states want to see a population gain. They want more representation in Congress. They don't want to be the one that loses out in that aspect. So the census can be kind of politically charged. And then there's all sorts of elements with the census regarding immigration as well. And people who are here legally or illegally, will they be counted? Won't they be counted? And that sort of thing. So you should be paying attention to this topic in the coming years as we start to discuss who's going to be administrating that census and what the outcome could possibly be. So this graph here shows a graph of the American people and some trends. This is important for political scientists to understand too, and for politicians to see the trends of different races of people, ethnicities of people over time. This is just kind of a projected one. I've actually seen some where the white non-Hispanic curve is much steeper, and same thing with the Hispanic curve. And so it shows that the Hispanic growth will more rapidly increase. This shows kind of a gradual increase here. African Americans will hold kind of steady, and Asian Americans will increase slightly too. So this is just kind of projected in the future to see what percentage of the population will make up these different groups. That's important because in this unit we'll be talking about, can we say if you are a 45-year-old white businessman with a college degree, can we predict how you will vote in an election? Political scientists say yes. And so that's why this sort of information is important. So one term that you need to know is political culture. This is different from political ideology. Political culture is an overall set of values widely shared within a society. So when we look at the United States and quote-unquote Americans as a whole, what are some of their values that they have? There are some that you can pinpoint to different countries. There's a certain value system that Iranians have. There's within their political culture. There's a value set that we have in the United States. We believe in, free press, free media, free and fair elections, all of these things tied into our political culture. Things can kind of change sometimes when all of a sudden you see a population shift in a state, and that's what this is kind of indicating here. There's something called the minority majority, and if you look here, it says percentage of state population made up of minority groups. And so if you look, some of these key states here have high percentages of minorities that live in that state. And so what does that mean for the political culture within that state, and how does that speak to the political culture of the whole country as you start to see minority groups come in and they start to become the majority? And will things change? I think that you could probably say yes, that the minority majority does affect these states when you think about the politics of California versus the politics of Texas, and how immigration is addressed, and how government funding is addressed, and all sorts of things. So this is something that we'll be talking about in class. Okay, so every 10 years, based on the census, like I mentioned before, the House gets reapportioned. You need to write down the term reapportionment or reapportioned. That's the process of reallocating or recounting the seats in the House of Representatives. So it's very important. It's a huge deal because, again, Idaho has 2 U.S. representatives because we have a low population. Gosh, it'd be awesome if we could have 3 U.S. representatives. California has, I think, like 53 U.S. representatives. So California has, a stronger voice in the House. If you look at low population states like Montana, they just have 1 U.S. representative. So the reapportionment is when you reallocate those seats in the House of Representatives. Now keep in mind that there is a fixed number of seats in the House of Representatives, and that's 435. And so that means that there's only a certain number of seats available. So if Idaho grows in population, it means that some other states decreased their population. And so what state is going to lose a representative so that Idaho can gain a representative? And if you look at one of the Electoral College maps in my classroom, it's the one on the east-facing wall. You can actually see in the corner of some of those states a light number, and that shows, or it's a plus and a minus number. And so it shows that some states gained some representatives and some lost. So that reapportionment process is really important after the census, and it's all connected to redistricting too. Because if you think about it, so Idaho has 2 U.S. districts, and Labrador and Simpson are our 2 U.S. representatives. Well, those districts are drawn by the state legislature, so they're already created on the map. All of a sudden, if our population grows like crazy and we get another representative, well, they're going to have to redraw those districts. And same thing with those states that lose a representative. They're going to have to redraw those districts because now, let's say California has 50 representatives instead of 53. So who is it that redraws those districts? That's the state legislature. And this is a huge deal because of gerrymandering. And we'll talk about gerrymandering in future lectures, and we'll do some gerrymandering ourselves in class. But just think about the power that gives to state legislatures. They get to draw the map. They get to determine who is voting in which district. All right, let's take a look at the population in the United States. So the graying of America, the fastest growing group is the group that's over 65. And this is the potential drain on Social Security by 2020. So we're going to see a real impact on it soon. And the reason why is because of our baby boomer group. And so this baby boomer group, they're all going to be retiring. They're all going to be collecting on Social Security at the same time. And we just don't have the population numbers of people working and putting into the Social Security fund to continue to fund that the way that we always have. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. They have raised the age to collect full Social Security, and there's some other tactics that the government is using to figure it out. Okay, let's talk about political socialization. So this is the process through which you acquire your political orientation. Now, you guys did a test on this in which you found out if you were conservative, liberal, etc., etc. The number one influence of your political socialization is family. And it may be you are exactly the same politically as your family, or you are the polar opposite of your family. But the fact is that you have spent the most time in your life with your family. And so a lot of times we'll see political leanings of children mirror that of their parents, or like I said, you end up going the polar opposite. But a lot of it is just due to that time that you've spent with your family, talking to them about different issues. Other influences can be mass media, it can be school and education. Keep in mind that at school, in my view, I'm here to help you to understand concepts and to challenge you to challenge your own thought process and belief system. It's not my job to tell you what to think, what to feel, all of those things. But yet, you still can be influenced by school and education, mass media, your friends, etc., etc. Political scientists say that all of these aspects are going to increase the chance that someone would vote. Higher income, being older because they have time, well educated because you're more aware of the issues. Usually white people vote, but it depends on the demographics and the issues of people. If you are a northerner, they tend to vote more than southerners. Union members vote more, and government employees as well. Okay, so let's look at polls. We're going to be looking at polling in class as well. So how polls are conducted. They do a random sample, and this is where they just assume that everyone has the same probability of being selected in the sample. So they draw from all different groups. This is what really blew my mind when I learned this, is that a good sample size of polling data for the whole country, the whole United States, is a sample size of 1,500. So if you get that sample size, then that is supposed to be quite reliable. Sampling error is looking at the confidence in your findings of your public opinion poll. So this should be an equal sign. This should be a plus. So plus or minus 3%. So you want this number to be as low as possible to show that your sampling error is very small. And that's just looking at all those outside factors that could be affecting the poll. So polling is everything in politics, everything. That's what politicians need to know what the public wants. It's what we use, those exit polls after elections, to see who is winning. Now, if you guys have been paying attention at all at the last presidential election, the polls were wrong. Hillary was supposed to win according to every single poll out there, pretty much. And a lot of these were quote-unquote reliable polls. But the polling was very wrong, and we'll talk about that a lot in class. But for purposes of just general knowledge of polls and what their purpose is, it's this sort of thing, to see what issues the people have and what they want the government to do about it. So I just have about a minute left to talk to you guys, so let me just briefly touch on political ideology. So this is a coherent set of beliefs about politics, public policy, and public purpose that you yourself have, and we will do some quizzes in class, so you will get to see what you test out as you may agree with it or not. But political ideology, will be looking at the Republican Party coalition and who makes that up. We'll be looking at the Democrat coalition and who makes that up too. And here's a term that I want to make sure I touch on before this lecture ends, and that's the gender gap. Women tend to vote for the Democratic candidates at higher rates than Republican candidates, usually. But, as seen in this last election, some of it has to do with race. More white women voted for Donald Trump than white women voted for Hillary. But if you look at African American women and Hispanic women, they voted more for Hillary than they did Trump. But in general, as a general term for purposes of this AP class, the gender gap means that women tend to vote more for Democratic candidates. Part of this has to do with having children. Part of it has to do with ideology on gun control and things in society to help keep their children safe. And I won't have time in this lecture to talk about how you participate in politics, so make sure that you read that section really closely in your book, and we'll be talking about it in class with an essay called Bowling Alone. So thanks for listening. Make sure you come see me with any questions.